So,
Mm.
there's always a time period before something becomes funny. So is COVID funny yet? Can we make jokes about it?
See, to be totally honest with you, I think you can laugh at anything if you do it in a right way. No matter how maybe morbid or inappropriate something may be to some person, if it's done right, you should be able to joke about everything. With COVID, I feel maybe it might become the hack topic whenever stand-up's back again. There'll be everybody talking about COVID, and it's how do you maybe look at it through a different slant? How do you go with that? So I think, if it's done right, it can be really funny. And if not, it might just be people groaning, oh, here we go again. But in terms of, like, I guess, appropriateness or inappropriateness of joke matter, I think as long as it's funny and good, I think you can joke about, you can find humor in anything at all, even the sort of more, the darker, more, maybe inappropriate topics, just as long as you do it right. But that's the thing, that not enough people do it right, and that's where problems arise, I think.
I mean, I'm guilty of having like a jet black sense of humor, so
Mm.
I will laugh at anything as long as it's funny.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's the same as me. Like, I even think, like, I don't know whether it's, since I suppose trying to write material or think of material, any situation you're in, like, I would sort of, my stand up would be based almost on it. Like, I'd sort of say it's a wee bit like pulling, a thread out of a woolen jumper. You get a wee idea, you think something, could this work? And then you start pulling at it and go, and then you sort of add the fabrication to it all as you're going along, and you get to the end of what maybe you think a joke is. So I think, like, with that, any situation you're in, you sort of go, could this be a bit? Could that be a bit? Could this be something? And I think, in most circumstances, there will be something, about it. Like, even, I suppose, we lost a dog during lockdown, as in he got put down, he didn't just away, So and it was the most. I was so sad about it, like, absolutely heartbroken. Like, he's part of the family, but now looking back, I'm like, right, that was a rough time, but how can I, make my own depression about this be funny? Because at the end of the day, he was a wee Shih Tzu. He was a wee Shih Tzu I inherited whenever my wife and I started going out. Whenever she moved in, she brought this dog who at the beginning didn't like him at all. Thought he had no personality. He was a wee jerk. I just not a fan. And then by the end, it was, I was out walking him, and again, I'm a very big man walking around with a sweet Shih Tzu, and people are probably looking, that's an odd parent, it's a very strange. And then in the end, I just thought this wee small, strange little fluffy dude would bring me so much grief. And I think, in some ways that's probably quite funny, So, you
yeah.
gotta look at everything and sort of be able to poke at it, I guess.
Have you ever like written a joke and maybe tried it on stage and the reaction was just like, oh, instead of like maybe the crowd didn't go well with the crowd and they felt it was maybe in bad taste or something?
I think, I'm sure there's definitely been some. I remember there was one joke in particular that again it's about, I guess, the construct of a joke and the wording, I think. And sometimes that's a problem for people, is that they hear a word and they just go offensive, but they don't get that just because you're saying a word doesn't mean you're actually making fun of that topic. So the joke that I had said I was, when I was a child, what was known as a bit of a handful, or in today's terms, seriously ADHD. That was the joke, but people heard that and they went, what? He's making fun. What was just more, wasn't making fun of people with ADHD or ADHD as a condition, but more so the fact that just whenever we were younger, and then when I was a kid, they didn't have diagnosis for these sort of conditions, so they're just like, see him, he's a bit of a handful way and run about the garden and this and that, so you didn't have those diagnoses. But I had some people come up and say I was a bad taste or it was really offensive. I sort of think, well, it's a joke at my expense rather than at a condition. But again, some people will, that's part and parcel really of it. If you say things, you need to be able to, I think, justify it, and to justify it in comedy, to me it should be funny and not directly aimed with malice, I think is probably the way to put it. Have been times I've seen people do jokes and the butt of the joke is malicious, or what they're saying is hateful, and there's a line between that, I think, and what's funny. Because some, like, again, if I was at a gig and there was maybe guys who were coming through who maybe didn't didn't really know themselves yet, and they'd say things. I'd be like, look, I'd watch that because maybe that'll, cause a bit of grief. Maybe try it this way or do it that way. And I think that's probably the way to do it. But I mean, in today's culture, some people would be like, nah, it's the end of them, never have them back. But I think, it's learning. You're always learning. And I think with comedy, it's something that keeps, you can keep writing about your experiences every step of the way, really. So, yeah, you definitely live and learn, and I've definitely learned some lessons in my time about bombing and being, having awkward after gig moments, trying to just run away from gigs, be like, just you keep the fee, it's fine, I'll see you later, just getting out of places. So yeah, there's that. I think that sort of, when you get used to bombing and having a terrible time, it makes you appreciate the good ones better,
I mean, like, that's something I've heard from a lot of comedians when I've been listening to interviews with them. It's just that you have to go up and you have to bomb. You have to be bad at it for a while before you're going to get anywhere. And I can't think of anything like any other career actually where you have to go through like that very, very like exposed period where there is no way to practice before you're on stage.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like playing the guitar.
Yeah.
I'll admit, when the first times I ever played gigs, I was still awful on my guitar. Like, now I think I'm about passable, but it was like it was always on me. I could be at home for 6 hours and just practice, but you can't really like practice comedy without an audience. Yeah. Like, how did you find that?
See, to be honest, whenever I started doing stand up, I think now probably I've been doing it for about 8 years, which in the grand scheme of things is probably not that long a time. Maybe in the local scene, it's an age. Like, I would probably say I'm one of the sort of the elder statesmen nowadays. But when I started, I was actually in a sketch group, so we had been doing sketches and live shows and that before I got into stand up, and it was like, I've always been a fan of stand up. I've always enjoyed it, but then I never really thought there was an entrance point to it. I didn't know how to get into it. And then when I was doing sketches in a group that I was in, we did the Edinburgh Fringe, and I met people like Shane Todd and Sean Haggerty and Mickey Bartlett and things like that. And then it was only through that and sort of, hanging out with those guys over the Fringe, going to shows and that there were a few open mics, and they sort of said, look, you're quite funny, why don't you try stand up? And that was sort of the first times I had kind of tried stand up. And like, looking back, I don't know, I do not know how I got past those first gigs, because there was nothing about them that was enjoyable, for the audience. For me, nothing. And I just remember other guys going up and doing really well, and then I was going up and just going, what is this? And you're on stage, and as soon as you speak, if the first joke doesn't even get something, you hope the second one will loosen them up, and then you just keep doing and saying things that you think are your funny bits, and nothing's happening, and you're just going, I have another 5 minutes of this to do, and then I have to walk through a crowded room of people with everyone just going, oh no, don't look at me, don't look at that guy, please, no, it's terrible, we're scundered for him, see you later. So I don't know what got me past that initial stage, because to begin with, it was awful. It was so anxious, so like, oh no, my friends are watching, no one's laughing, this is terrible, that I honestly don't know. I think the only thing that got me past it was I think I wrote my first bit that I think was an actual bit, and I still kind of throw it in there to this day. Other than that, I think I was just saying things with no beginning, middle, and an end, and it was just like stupid. So I think once I found what I wanted to talk about, what my sense of humor was, that then made it a lot easier to write and do bits as well. Whereas to begin with, I think I wouldn't be a swear a minute comedian, but then at the same time, I sometimes use words in a flippant way to just almost try to shock people. And did he just? And then by the time they go, did he just say he's on another bit? So I think when I wrote my first bit, that was when I went, right, I think I figured it out in my head how to do it. And then I think that's kind of what spurred me on to keep trying. And that's the first bit that got a proper laugh. And then I went, right, okay, that's the style I want to have, and that's how I'm going to sort of push myself from now on, really, rather than just. I remember I did one bit about in Edinburgh, and it was about walking around the streets of Edinburgh but being sweaty, and I don't know why I ever did it, because looking back, I'm embarrassed even thinking about it. And it was like, there's no other reason to it other than I was just an unfit guy struggling to walk around the hills of Edinburgh. Very odd.
Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.